fifth round action taking place here in episode 12 of the Global Cities Tournament 2020 here on GeoBrax. Joining me as always is the master of the draw, who, by the way, still not a robot. We're going to begin things today here in the fifth round with quadrant number 1. That means the number 1 overall seed, New York City, United States, will start us off. They are taking on the number 17 overall seeded team, Seoul, South Korea. First category, please.
Highest elevation.
Neither of these cities is known for their elevations. However, that doesn't mean much to Seoul because they're taking the category at only 38 meters, whereas New York City's highest elevation is apparently only 10 meters. That is 1-0 to Seoul. Can they make it 2-0?
Tallest building.
You have to feel very badly for whichever city loses this category. Wow. The Lotte World Tower in Seoul, 123 floors, 555 meters, whereas one World Trade Center, 104 floors, is 541 meters, which means by 14 meters, Seoul is in to a 2-0 lead. What happens here in the third category?
Largest stadium.
This is where the technicality that the stadiums must be within the city limits is going to come back to haunt the American metropolis. The largest stadium located within New York City is actually Yankee Stadium in the Bronx for baseball. It seats 47,309. But the largest stadium in Seoul is the Seoul Olympic Stadium, and it seats 69,950. Seoul is making this look like a breeze. They're up 3-0. Are they gonna sweep the number 1 seed?
Traffic index.
This is yet again a very competitive category, 161.50 to 157.69. But it's also going to go to Seoul. They have swept New York City. Seoul, South Korea is going to the quarterfinals. Today's second matchup here in the fifth round features number 34 overall, Istanbul, Turkey. They are taking on the number 6 overall seed, Hong Kong, with a berth in the quarterfinals on the line. Mr. Master of the Draw, please start us off.
International visitors.
Istanbul receives very, very many international visitors per year. In fact, 13.4 million many. Hong Kong also receives many international visitors, just not many, 8.4 million. They lose by 5 million visitors per year. That is just how popular Istanbul is, and they're out to a 1-0 lead. What happens here in the second category?
Cost of living.
As you probably guessed, living in an Asian tiger city is a little bit more expensive than living in a city at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. But not as far apart as you might have imagined. If you had goods that cost $1,361 in Istanbul, they would have cost you $1,668 in Hong Kong. That means Istanbul taking a 2-0 lead. Can Hong Kong pull it back? Third category, please.
Purchasing power.
This is usually the inverse of cost of living, and indeed it holds true here. Purchasing power of those living in Hong Kong is 120% higher than those living in Istanbul. That means Istanbul's lead is cut down to 2-1. Fourth category incoming.
Population.
The population of Istanbul is 15.8 1 million. Hong Kong is 7.5, basically double because, Istanbul has another continent to use. They're up 3-1. Can they end it in 5?
Gross domestic product.
Istanbul with a pretty large gross domestic product in terms of cities, $237 billion per year. GDP of HKG, 341 billion per year. That means it's now 3-2 lead at Istanbul, category the 6th.
Crime index.
Hong Kong loves to hear that. Their crime index is only 22. Istanbul, pretty run-of-the-mill, 47.42, but this is the best of 6 and they're tied 3-3. And looks like we're going to have our first panel discussion of the 5th round. It appears that the fates have demanded that we have yet another panel discussion. This is the first one here in the 5th round. This is a matchup from the first quadrant. We have a city that we've already discussed, one that we both actually picked last round to beat Guangzhou. This is Istanbul. Do you remember these days?
I do.
Just like they were yesterday, perhaps?
Almost.
So Istanbul find themselves back here in a panel discussion. This time around, they are taking on the number 6 overall seed, Hong Kong. We discussed in episode 10 the historical background of Istanbul, so we're going to save that for episode 10. Feel free to scroll back through the playlists. We're going to go straight to the historical context of Hong Kong. Now, the Qin dynasty conquered the indigenous Bai Yue people. They brought Hong Kong into China in 214 BCE. It did fall for a brief period to the non-Yue kingdom, but with the Han conquest, it was recaptured by 111 BCE. A lot of time passes. It wasn't a city of any real note. The Southern Song, as they were running for their lives from the Mongol invasion, they located briefly to Kowloon City. But it was only after the Ming Dynasty came to power that there was a steady stream of migration into Kowloon. The first European arrived from Portugal in 1513. They set up a trading post named Tamao. They were expelled in the 1520s, but relations were reestablished by 1549, and the permanent lease to Macau was granted in 1557. However, the Qing Dynasty, the Manchurians, were not so open to foreigners. They had the hygiene policy. They restricted maritime trade. They wanted to promote isolationism. And after the Great Clearance finally ended in 1683, foreigners were allowed to return to Hong Kong in 1684. But the Canton system was established by the Qing Dynasty, lasting from 1757 to 1842. This is a great boon economically because it meant that there was essentially a monopoly for the Kohong, and any trade would have to go through them. All taxes were levied by them. Huge boon to the Cantonese people. The British, of course, were trying to sell opium because that's the only way they could get their trade deficit back. Lin Zexu eradicated the opium trade in 1839, so the British said, no thank you. And they just went ahead, won the Opium Wars, and with the Treaty of Nanking in 1842, Hong Kong was ceded to them. They won the Second Opium War. They got the Kowloon Peninsula as well. And by 1898, Britain had obtained a 99-year lease. It was occupied for 4 years by the Japanese during World War II, but the rapid industrialization during the Asian Tiger period from the 1950s saw mass transit, infrastructure improvements, public housing programs, and all these great advancements. By the 1990s, Hong Kong was a global financial center, and on July 1st, 1997, ceded back to China under the one country, two systems doctrine. I am joined here live in the flesh by Mr. Botlow. I'm going to allow him to open the discussion of why Istanbul or why Hong Kong.
Good to be back. Let's get going right off the bat. For me, it's Istanbul. I'm sticking with my pick. I believe in it. I believe in the city. Starting just off with Hong Kong, its pluses: global financial center, now a part of China, which we all know as a growing superpower in the world in terms of a nation. Hong Kong, quite a bit going for itself. Beautiful skyline, beautiful city on the water. But, some of the points I made in the earlier episode about Istanbul just can't be beaten. I still don't believe it rivals Hong Kong in terms of a city that, can straddle two continents, can bridge Europe and Asia, is a bridge to a burgeoning Arabic and Muslim world via the country of Turkey with the westernized European nations. And, to me, the long culture to Istanbul's attachment as Constantinople via the Byzantine Empire and the Roman Empire. Of course, Hong Kong has a long history too, but this one, for me, has got to go to Istanbul. Back to you.
Thank you, Botlo. That was very nice. Thank you for your insight, as always. That's why you are a panel member.
Definitely.
That's why we pay you the big bucks. The check is in the mail. Thank you for your service.
Eagerly awaiting it.
Well, you're going to be eagerly awaiting it for quite a long time. If we do remember from episode 10, we both picked Istanbul. I am not going with them this time. I'm actually going with Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I often say that Istanbul is my favorite city in the world, but this is the Global Cities Tournament. And what do I love more than anything else are cities that run on public transportation. Over 90% of all daily trips in Hong Kong are actually made on public transportation, which is the highest number in the world. In fact, in the year 1997, they introduced the contactless payment card, the Octopus card, the second of its kind in the world. The first one was in South Korea. And it's led to ubiquitous use for contactless payments, both on public transport and now also in retail stores. Of course, they've had a funicular, the Peak Tram, since 1888. They have moving pavements and escalators. They have the longest outdoor covered escalator in the world, which is just even strange to conceptualize.
Actually been on that. It's quite a doozy.
And you're still not picking them. Anyhow, Hong Kong is the world's busiest airport for international cargo, the 7th largest stock exchange. Hong Kong has the world's busiest airport for international cargo, the 7th largest stock exchange, the 7th busiest container port. How can you be more global than them? And of course, the sites, they have the neighborhood of Aberdeen, the floating villages, the Tonka people, famous for their heritage. They live on the boats to this day. There are some floating seafood restaurants. You have the peak of Chinese cinema from the 1940s and 1990s, which took place based on the martial arts craze. Jet Li, Jackie Chan, and of course, Bruce Lee. You have the wonderful Tin Hau temples dedicated to the Fujianese sea goddess Mazu. It's ubiquitous. And of course, the dragon boat racing. I know we like to talk about sports. Originated in the Pearl River Delta about 2,500 years ago. They've turned it into a modern sport since 1976. I just feel like they're more on the cusp of modern world. And that's why they're my pick. Do you know what that means?
I believe so.
Are you gonna give somebody a call?
I think so. Let's do it.
We gotta have a tiebreaker here. Get Mr. Mayanife on the phone, please.
I'm definitely going to go with Istanbul on this. It's the more diverse city as far as culture. You have a mix of both the Asian and European cultures. Just hands down, this one is an easy one. Istanbul wins.
And yes, of course, I've been voted down yet again.
All right.
Yeah, I'm going to just give the microphone to you. Istanbul has won. What do you have to say?
Well, I had conviction in my choice, and, I know at the end of your argument for Hong Kong, you talked about sports, and look, Hong Kong has some great up-and-coming sports, very English-centric or Great Britain-centric, horse racing, cricket, rugby, etc. But, I think Istanbul is on the cusp of global sports. We talked about last time with their soccer franchises, and they're really delving into more sports that can be shared around the world, in my personal opinion. On to the next round for Istanbul. That's all I can say.
Indeed. they are in to the quarterfinals. Keeping it moving here in episode 12, we are now into the second quadrant. First matchup is number 5 overall seed Beijing, China. They're taking on number 87 overall Chengdu, China. That's right. An all-Chinese matchup here in the 5th round for the right to go to the quarterfinals. What's the first category? Mr. Master the Draw.
Tallest building.
Does the capital city have a taller building than the non-capital city? The International Finance Square 1 and 2. For some reason, one has 50 floors and number 2 has 48 floors, but they're both 248 meters tall, and they're both in Chengdu. But the China Zun building at 109 floors reaches up to 528 meters. That is more than enough to give Beijing a 1-0 lead. Second category, please.
Best skyline.
Both of these cities have quite beautiful skylines, if I do say so myself. Chengdu has a river that curves like this, a tower with a ball on it. It has a rectangle with a hole through most of the building itself. Not sure what that's for. Looks pretty cool. But Beijing also has a rectangle with a hole through the bottom, but it has some nice MC Escher looking lines. That's the CCTV headquarters, and they have this, it looks like an hourglass, but an absurdly tall hourglass shaped building. Just goes like this in the middle and comes back out at the top. Overall, just more beauty going on in Beijing, and they eke this category out. They are up 2-0. Third category, please.
Largest urban park.
The largest urban park in Beijing is the Chaoyang Park, 713 acres. The largest one in Chengdu was only 80 acres, and that is the Huanhuaxi Park. They're down 3-0. They're going to need to come hard and come correct if they want to bring back this deficit. Fourth category.
Population.
The population of Chengdu is 11.2 million, but Beijing, 21.4 million. The capital city says that they're China's representative with the 4-0 sweep. Beijing to the quarterfinals. Continuing here with some more 5th round action. The final matchup of the second quadrant is, of course, the number 18 overall side. It'll be Melbourne, Australia. They're taking on the number 3 overall side, Paris, France. And how is this matchup going to begin?
Tallest building.
The tallest building in Melbourne was formerly the Eureka Sky Tower, but just recently, Australia 108 has been completed. It is 100 floors exactly. That is 317 meters, but the ever so famous and eminent Eiffel Tower at 3 floors tall is 324 meters. Paris to a 1-0 lead. Second category, please.
Largest stadium.
The largest stadium that we think about when we think about Paris is Stade de France, but that's in Saint-Denis, so it is excluded. Largest stadium, therefore, is Parc des Princes, 47,929, but the MCG, the Melbourne Cricket Ground, 100,024. That's right, we're tied at 1. Third category, please.
Best flag.
We look at the 2 flags here. Melbourne looks like a very confused Northern Ireland flag with a cow and a whale and a ship. I don't have any clue what the motif is here. What are you doing? Paris has a large coat of arms. Usually you take points off for that, but the red and the blue color scheme, fantastic. The wreaths, the ship that's in the center, it makes some sense with the crown above. Paris is going to take this one. They're up 2-1. Fourth category, please.
surface area.
Melbourne keeps punching back. 9,993 square kilometers is the second time this tournament they're taking this category. Paris, only 105 square kilometers, probably the largest margin of victory we've ever seen in this category. They're tied at 2. Who is going up 3-2?
Annual rainfall.
Paris, not the wettest city, only 638 millimeters per year, and that is why they are up 3-2. Melbourne, you only get 566 millimeters per year. You're down 3-2, but you're down 1-0. You were down 2-1. You're down 3-2. Can you tie it again?
Purchasing power.
Yes, the citizens, the Parisians of the mega city certainly have a lower purchasing power than the people down here in Melbourne. 23.2% higher purchasing power for those in Melbourne, which means, that's right, we're having our second panel discussion of the episode. It appears, Botslow, that we are yet again here in the panel discussion studio. We have something to discuss in the panel. Who would have thought? That's what brought us here. We are currently in the 5th round in the second quadrant. A little bit of a surprise to a lot of people that Melbourne, Australia has made it to a 3-3 draw against Paris. They were down 1-0, 2-1, 3-2 in this matchup. They've managed to pull it back. They're even. I'm going to give you some background here on Melbourne, if that's okay with you.
Sure, go for it. Love to hear it.
Thank you for your permission. So for this one, I might just have to put all my Aussie accent. Anyone reckon this to play? Any complaints here?
Not from me.
Alright, maybe some complaints from people living in the southern hemisphere, but there are many fewer of you than there are the rest of us. Alright, Melbourne. A brief history. It's been inhabited for over 40,000 years. It was originally known as Nam, N-A-A-R-M, Nam. It's an indigenous name for what's currently known as Port Phillip Bay. Of course, the first British settlement was built in 1803, but the city of Melbourne was not founded till the year 1835. Settlers moved in from Tasmania. In the year 1851, it was declared capital of the colony of Victoria. With the gold rush of the 1850s came a boom period, and the establishment of Melbourne is an economic force. Perhaps even the world's richest cities by the late 1880s. The Melbourne International Exhibition of the year 1880 led to much modernisation. In fact, electric lights had been installed in the city of Melbourne by the year 1881. The tramway opened in 1885. And of course, in the modern era, Melbourne still has the largest urban tram network in the entire world. And it served as the capital of the Federation of Australia from the year 1901 to the year 1927. After World War II, immigration from Southern Europe and Mediterranean boosted the population. And with the lifting of the height restrictions in the Central Business District in the year 1958, the skyscrapers came in, and the mining boom in 1969-1970 resulted in the establishment of BHP Billiton and Rio Tinto. We're going to go to the number 3 overall seed, Paris, France. Give you some historical context on France. What would you like me to do in the French accent?
I don't know about that one. You can try it.
I absolutely will not. A Celtic tribe inhabited the area that is now Paris back in the year 250 BCE. A major trading route was crossing the Seine River at the Ile de la Cité. Now, the Romans actually conquered this area in 52 BCE. They named the town Lutetia. The first time that it was Frankish was when Clovis the Frank, the first Merovingian king, made Paris the capital in the year 508. And as the Franks slowly took over the rest of Gaul, there was a steady stream of folks from Gaul moving into the capital, as you might imagine. The first city walls were erected between 1190 and 1215. And by the year 1328, it was the largest city in Europe. The English occupied it from 1420 to 1436. Not even divine intervention of Jeanne d'Arc could stop this. This was the 100 Years' War. Of course, they eventually kicked out the British. Paris was a Catholic stronghold during both the French Wars of Religion from 1562 to 1598 and during the 30 Years' War that culminated in 1648. Now for the good stuff. During the Age of Enlightenment, Paris was the financial center of all of continental Europe, a center of science, philosophy, book publishing. Had a tumultuous period between the storming of the Bastille in 1789 and, of course, the Reign of Terror after the French Revolution, Napoleon Bonaparte becoming dictator, the restoration of the empire. Mostly had recovered by about 1815. The first rail line arrived in 1837. And Georges Eugène Haussmann, prefect of the Seine, really made it one of the world's first modern cities with new aqueducts, sewers, widened boulevards, an opera house, lots of parks. By 1860s, Paris had expanded to its current size of 20 arrondissements, and it was illuminated by tens of thousands of gas lamps, and that's how it got the nickname City of Lights. Rose to global prominence with the 1889 and 1900 Universal Expositions, boosting its international profile. Which, of course, now leads to what we actually came here for, which is to hear Botlo discuss why it is that he has chosen who he has chosen.
Alrighty, back at it again. So, right off the bat, I have chosen Paris on this one. You know, a lot of reasons for that. But first of all, I'd like to say a few things about Melbourne. Great city. Melbourne, I think, is in a historical world history context, maybe a future Paris potentially when it comes to the points I'll talk about when it comes to Paris, in my personal opinion and humble opinion. But Paris has got this for me. You know, romance capital of the world, architectural wonders such as the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, the history, its strategic importance in Europe and the world. In terms of the geopolitical context of the Western world, a strong place in terms of Paris at the center figurehead of that for the French and multiple Western industries and geopolitical organizations. So for me, Paris has got this one. Melbourne, great city. Honestly, could have gone both ways, but had to go one way and it had to be Paris. So for me.
It could have gone both ways, but it had to be Paris. It has the second busiest subway system in Europe, the world's busiest railway station outside of Japan, which somehow has the 23 busiest. Anyhow, the museums of Paris cannot be outclassed. You have the Louvre, you have the Musée d'Orsay, you have the Monet, Rodin, Picasso Museum, the Champs-Élysées with the Arc de Triomphe, where they have the final stage of the Tour de France, Montmartre Hill, the Basilica of Sacré-Cœur, Basilica de Notre-Dame, the Panthéon, all wonderful places. It's the birthplace of Cubism, abstract art, Fauvism, and yet I couldn't get over the fact that every building was beige or white stone, every roof was dark blue or gray sloped mansard roofs that were first built around the year 1550 on part of the Louvre, and it just every building seemed to look the same. And when you go to Melbourne, it is not that way.
Old world charm. That's what I have to say.
Old world charm versus new world spice of life. Melbourne has Federation Square, Flinders Street Station, MCG, Melbourne Cricket Grounds. They are the home of the Australian Open since 1972. Australian rules football was invented there in 1858. First ever test cricket match played there, 1877. First ever one-day international, 1971. Greenery as far as the eye can see, known as Australia's Garden City. And of course, the Victorian era buildings have been preserved. On Collins Street, you have the Shrine of Remembrance. I just think the architecture was so much more varied. I like the fact that they pretend to be part of Asia, because then you just have amazing Asian cuisine. You're on cutting edge of the cutting edge continent, even though you're in the Pacific. So you have the Oceanian flavor. Again, I thought it was more beautiful. And they say Paris is the romance capital, but I thought Melbourne was more beautiful. I love the architecture. It's more interesting to me. Which means this one is going back to Maya Ife. Wow, he is going to be running up a long-distance phone bill thanks to us. Let's call him up.
All right.
I must say, I don't know how Melbourne snuck this far into the tournament. However, they came against a heavyweight in Paris. Paris, you're going to have different places as far as culture, as far as museums. There's just way more to do in Paris than there is in Melbourne. This isn't a question. Paris is the winner.
The sigh of being outvoted for the third time. I guess this one was not as surprising as the previous ones. Probably the number 3 overall seed. But I have to stick up for what I believe in, and I believe in losing, apparently. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to Botlo.
It's just, these are how things are, I'm glad Maya and Ife agreed with me. Paris, I mean, so many things. You mentioned things that, as you were talking, I was just like, I can't believe I didn't mention that. The Notre Dame, the museums, the paintings, the culture, the arts, the food, the cuisine. I mean, I can't continue expounding about how great of a city Paris is.
You can.
And well, and I have to give it to you. Personally, I love Melbourne too. That is where I would love to go, love to travel, love to visit. But this is a competition, and it's got to go to Paris. You talk about sports, PSG, superstars, supposedly the future of world soccer. So, just can't be beat. Back to you.
All right, well, I got to say, good on you, Paris. Welcome to the quarterfinals. Jumping straight in to some more 5th round action here in quadrant number 3, we have the number 4 overall seed, Tokyo, Japan. They're taking on the number 15 overall seed, Berlin, Germany. Begin!
Traffic index.
Traffic index of Tokyo, respectably low, 130.01. Berlin, it's respectably low, 100.57. We're making up words, and Berlin's making up a 1-0 lead going into the second category.
Highest elevation.
Tokyo, known to have beautiful mountains in its skyline, Mount Fuji outside the city limits, of course, but we know there's a mountain range, whereas in Berlin, there was not a mountain range. 34 meters, maximum height Berlin, 2017, maximum height of Tokyo. We're tied at 1. Who's pushing ahead in the third category?
Population.
Tokyo is pushing ahead in the third category. Certainly 14 million is more than 3.7 million. Not much more to that category. Berlin, you're down 1-2. Can you even it back up?
Best flag.
Both of these are pretty pleasant. One thing about the Berlin flag that a little bit unsettling is that it is off-center. Also, why does this bear have such a very fierce and oddly shaped extended tongue? Not sure. Otherwise, pretty nice flag, but the symmetry of Tokyo's flag. The 6 spokes looks like maybe a subway map, also maybe the steering wheel of a boat. That's pretty cool, and also very, very few cities or national flags use the color purple. In fact, only one country has purple in its flag. It's the island country of Dominica. Not relevant to this discussion, but what is that we're taking Tokyo for best flag here. They're up 3-1, and they finish it in 5.
Gross domestic product.
Berlin, your gross domestic product is 172 billion per year, and somehow still that's less than $1 for every 10 that Tokyo is going to have in GDP. 1.79 trillion. Tokyo, you're off to the quarterfinals. Continuing here in the third quadrant, the number 12 overall seed, Shanghai, China, is taking on the city that just won't die. They've gone to the maximum number of categories in all 3 rounds they played so far. Number 27 seed, Dubai, United Arab Emirates. And if they somehow push this to a 3-3 tie, I'm just start the categories, please.
Average high temperature.
The average high temperature of Dubai is 33.33 Celsius. The average high monthly temperature of Shanghai is 19.42. That is closer to 23, which is the target score. Shanghai's up 1-0. Second category, please.
Busiest airport.
They both have very busiest airports. You gotta give them both that. Dubai International DXB, 89.1 million passengers. The Shanghai Pudong PVG, 74 million. That's a lot, but it's still too few here. We're tied at 1. Category the third.
Traffic index.
Traffic index of Dubai is 179.28. In Shanghai, it's 192.39. Traffic's actually worse in the Chinese city. That means Dubai's up 2-1. Fourth category, please.
Crime index.
Nobody, and I do mean nobody, is going to beat Dubai in this category. 16.34. I don't know if they have crime in the dictionary. Crime index of Shanghai is actually pretty good as well, 34.66, but they are down 3-1. Can Dubai finally avoid maxing out the number of categories? Fifth category, please.
Population.
Oh, Mr. Master the Draw. You know Shanghai has a higher population. 24.9 million against 3.3 million. Okay, it's 3-2. Can Dubai finish this in 6?
Largest urban park.
Well, the good news for Dubai is that your largest park is 117 acres, Zabil Park. Very respectable. Largest urban park is Century Park for Shanghai, 346 acres. Dubai again, going the maximum. Bring on the panel discussion. Back at it yet again, here with my dear friend, fellow panel member, Box Low in the wonderful studio. Looking fantastic as always.
Oh yeah.
I know I am. And so we got ourselves here a matchup in the 5th round in quadrant number 3, number 12 overall seed, Shanghai. Had a relatively easy path to get here, at least when compared to number 27 overall, Dubai. And Dubai, 5 categories, 2nd round. 5 categories, 3rd round. 6 categories, panel discussion, 4th round. 6 categories, panel discussion, 5th round. They've maximized the drama. We went over their strengths, their history in episode 11. And as we are currently in episode 12, that is already on the YouTube. Go ahead and review if you are so inclined, but we will go ahead with the history of Shanghai. Do I have your permission?
Of course, let's do it.
Thank you, sir. Shanghai was already in existence by the Warring States period of China's history. That was 475 BCE, which we all know. They were part of the Chu state, which borders the Yellow Sea, as we all know. In the year 746 CE, it was known as Qinglong Town. It was a trading port that developed through trade with the other Chinese provinces along the Yangtze River, also along the coast of China. They traded internationally with Silla, which is in modern-day South Korea, and of course with the Japanese. By the end of the Song Dynasty, Shanghai found itself as a center of trade. In fact, a seawall was erected in the year 1172 to protect the fledgling city. The Ming Dynasty built an even better wall in 1554 to protect it from raids by Japanese pirates. That is correct. Japanese pirates.
Wow.
Those existed. In the year 1602, the city god temple was built, which was pretty interesting, as Shanghai was not a capital of a prefecture, but yet they still had a temple built to them. That's how important they were as a trading and economic center. In the year 1684, the Kangxi Emperor reversed the prohibition on ships going to the ocean which meant that trade was opening up again. The customs office for the Jiangsu province was moved to Shanghai in the year 1732. It made it the powerhouse of the lower Yangtze. And after the Opium Wars and the Treaty of Nanking in 1842, Shanghai was one of 5 ports opened by the Western world forcefully to international trade. Now, the Japanese took it over. In 1895, when they won the first Sino-Japanese War, they built the first factories there, and they tore down the city walls. In 1914, it was too constricted. They needed to build the city out. And then the Communist Party of China was actually founded in the French concession area of Shanghai in the year 1921. The May 30th movement of 1925 launched the general strikes against imperialism, leading to the rise of Chinese nationalism. And by 1949, with the victory of the People's Liberation Army, most of the foreign firms actually moved out of Shanghai to Hong Kong. Cultural Revolution, 1966, 1976, threw the city into disarray, and only with the initiation of economic reforms under Deng Xiaoping in 1990 was Shanghai permitted to reopen to the world, and now it is the world's most populous city. So what do you have to say about this matchup? Dubai or Shanghai?
Well, you know me, I cut to the chase. It's Dubai. It's got to be Dubai. Have never been to either of these cities, but I've spoken Dubai's merits in the previous video, and it's Dubai here again for me. Its location as an international hub. I think, as I said in an earlier argument between two cities, Melbourne. As I mentioned earlier, Shanghai's in the same boat. I think it's lacking Dubai currently. Will it catch up? I hope so. I'm sure it will. It's a growing city in terms of in terms of China and its urban conglomerations, and it's definitely a city that I believe is still looking inward into what's happening inside China and a little bit outward. But in comparison to Dubai, can't be beat. Dubai is all about bringing the world in. Doesn't matter. Wants all kinds of investments. You name it, they'll copy it, they'll take it. They want to grow, and they want your money, and they want to succeed and become the world's best city. So, Dubai it is.
Thank you, Botlow. And you stuck with Istanbul. Now you've also stuck with Dubai. I did not pick Dubai last time. I picked Los Angeles. What you said about Shanghai being focused mostly on China right now. In fact, Shanghai is the city that gets the most money from tourism of any city in the world.
Wow.
Yes. But only 2.5% of those tourists are foreigners. 97.5% of its tourists are from inside of China. Now, of course, the China Art Palace is the largest art gallery in all of Asia. It's considered the second powerhouse of financial technology in the world after New York. It has the second tallest building in the world. We know Dubai has the first, but the Shanghai Tower is number 2. It's got the 4th largest stock exchange in the world. It has the largest metro network, the most expansive bus system. And yet, if this were just most important city on earth, I think I would pick Shanghai over Dubai. But this is about the global cities. And seeing how 97.5% of its tourists are from within China, there's something about Shanghai that doesn't quite yet have the draw. I see the bund, but I don't see the draw. You don't see massive international sporting events. You don't see the World Chess Championship taking place. Shanghai is happening in Dubai between a Norwegian and a Russian. Something about the draw of Dubai. I know I labeled it so coarsely previously as just a desert play place for rich people.
You did.
But that is kind of what Shanghai has positioned itself to be within China.
Yes.
In all honesty. Yes. And since it's a global cities tournament, I'm actually going to have to give the nod here to Dubai. We're going to save some on the phone bill here. Let Maya Nife have some time to himself. But that means, we can say it together, Dubai is going to the quarterfinals. We are now Into the fourth quadrant here in the fifth round. We're starting off with number 63 overall, Guangzhou, China. They're taking out the number 9 overall seed, Singapore. Begin!
Busiest airport.
The busiest airport in Singapore is Changi. They get 65.6 million passengers per year, but the Guangzhou Baiyun Airport, 69.7 million passengers per year. That is a 1-0 lead for the lowest ranked city left in this field. On to the second category.
Gross domestic product.
Guangzhou, in spite of sharing so much with Shenzhen and Hong Kong, still makes 385 billion per year on their own. And Singapore is 374 billion. That means Guangzhou up 2-0. Can they take down yet another top 10 seed? They took down Chicago in the third round.
Largest urban park.
Largest urban park is Yueshu Park. For Guangzhou, that is 213 acres. In Singapore, it is the East Coast Park at 460 acres. Guangzhou now only up 2-1. Fourth category, please.
Traffic index.
Traffic index of Guangzhou, 138. Even. Traffic index of Singapore, 147.20. That means Guangzhou is now up 3-1. Can they finish off this bracket buster?
Annual rainfall.
Guangzhou, 1,692 millimeters per year. That is very wet, but it is not the Strait of Malacca wet. Wow, 2,271 millimeters per year. Does it ever not rain in Singapore? You pulled it back to 3-2. Can Singapore tie it at 3?
Tallest building.
Tallest building in Singapore, it's the Guangzhou Tower. 64 floors, 290 meters tall. That is going to go up against the CTF Finance Center. 111 floors, 530 meters tall. No one can stop this Cinderella. Guangzhou to the quarterfinals. I reckon that we have time for one more matchup here to end the fifth round. It's the final one in the fourth quadrant. It's going to feature number 11 overall side, Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. They're taking on the number 2 overall side. That would be London, England. Mr. Master of the Draw plays. Let's begin.
Best flag.
Looking there, London didn't do too much to the national flag, did they? They just put a sword whose handle is not level. Well, that's fine. You can compare that one to the English flag in the top middle of the Sydney flag, and the London one's better. You can compare it to the one on the top right, and the London flag is better. You can compare it to the very large yellow and blue with the ship on the bottom, and the London flag is better. And maybe the one on the top left with the 3 seashells has a chance, but I'm thinking London probably beats all 4 of those flags, and they're all in the same flag. So 1-0 London. Second category, por favor.
Highest elevation.
The highest elevation in London is a mere 11 meters. It's 36 in Sydney. Not too tall, but not too small. We're tied at 1. Third category, please.
International visitors.
Sydney, Australia is pretty popular with the internationals. 4.9 million of them visit per year. But London, 19.2 million international visitors per year. London is up 2-1. Fourth category, please.
Best skyline.
We know that London has won this one before. But their skyline is rather small. It's pretty cool. You get the Shard, London Eye. A lot of nice architecture, but maybe 10 tall buildings. Sydney just doesn't stop with the skyscrapers. And they're rather beautiful. You mix the glass, you mix the curves, you mix the angles, you mix the heights, you have so many more. Sydney's gonna take this one. We're tied at 2, going into the 5th category.
Busiest airport.
This one, unfortunately for Sydney, ties back into the international visitors per year. Sydney International Airport, 41.9 million per year, but Heathrow in London, 80.9 million. London, England up 3-2. Do they finish it here in the 6th category?
Population.
Population of Sydney, 5.4 million, but how many live in London? That's right, it's 9 million. That means London's going to take it 4-2. They're going to be facing Guangzhou in the quarterfinals. That was a very special episode on behalf of Mr. Master of the Draw and myself. Thank you all for joining in. The next episode, episode 13, will be the quarterfinals. We're down to 8 and only 8 cities remaining. And if you want to know what's gone ahead of us, what's come before us, what the draw looks like now, check us out on the Discord. And if you want to make sure that you're not missing any of this action here on the GeoBrax channel, you see it before. You'll see it again. But be a friend and join in.